Welcome back, my friends, to the Derate the Hate podcast. I am your host, Wilk Wilkinson, your blue-collar sage, calming outrage and helping to navigate a world divided by fog and those who would spread that fear, outrage, and grievance. Each week, I'm sharing stories from my path and using the power of conversation and collaboration with my many great guests. Together, we chart a course toward understanding, bridging divides, and fostering a community where wisdom prevails over discord. Friends, it really is about bettering the world one attitude at a time. We did not create the hate, but together we can derate the hate. The only good thing about a bad attitude is we have the ability as individuals to change it. For me, it starts with gratitude and personal accountability. I am so incredibly grateful that you have taken the time to join me for another powerful DTH episode. Please remember to subscribe and share the DTH podcast with your network of friends. If you would like to support the show, check out the Support Us page on the Derate the Hate website. With that, my friends, let's get to it.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of Derate the Hate. My name is Julian Adorney. I'm thrilled to be your guest host, filling in for Wilk Wilkinson. I am really excited for this conversation. It's one that we've been trying to do for a few months now. Scheduling conflicts kind of got in the way here and there. But it's the third series in what I'm calling the Difficult Conversations series, kind of a homage to Peter Coleman, about how can we take some of the most tense, fraught, difficult conversations in society where identities are really wrapped up in being right or wrong, and we can often feel personally attacked by people who disagree with us. And how can we have a really civil conversation there? And how can we even go a little bit beyond that and reframe, instead of a I win, you lose, well, I won the debate, well, you lost. How can we reframe it as a mutual search for truth? Or even just a mutual search to better understand each other as complex and flawed humans who may see the world differently. And that's okay. And so I actually don't know what to expect from this conversation. I'm absolutely thrilled. But we have with us my wife, the beautiful and intelligent Cassie Kimbriel. We just got married in December. And so she is a theology major who's done a fair amount of work with like refugees and NGOs overseas. And so she'll be kind of talking about Christianity. And then my good friend Angel Eduardo, who is very, very well known in kind of the atheist circuit, talking about, I think you would phrase as the unreasonableness of believing in God, or the fact that it's not the most plausible thing to believe in. Is that fair?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah. And so obviously on my end, I just want to lay my cards on the table. I'm very biased in this conversation because first off, I'm married to Cassie, so it's kind of hard for me to come on and publicly disagree with her. And also, like Cassie, I'm a very devout Christian. I mean, God is this incredibly important part of my life, which, you know, listeners will know from my last conversation with Angel. That said, I'm here in this capacity only as a moderator, and so I'd consider it something of a personal failing if I were to reach the end of this and people were to say like, oh, we thought you put your thumb on the scale supporting Cassie or whatever it is. And so I'm going to try very hard, just be non-biased and just kind of facilitate the conversation.
Great.
Sounds great.
So Angel, can you kick us off? The proposition is God real? And that's kind of a crude way to think about it, but we needed something short and pithy.
Sure.
Can you kick us off as to why do you think it's an unreasonable or implausible belief that there is a God who talks to us and answers prayers and stuff like that?
Okay. Well, yeah. So the first thing I was going to say is that you're going to have to get more specific because what does that word mean to you? And then we can talk, right? So just for an example, I remember talking to a friend about this, and it just occurred to me to kind of work her through this line of questioning. And the first question was, okay, what is the likelihood? What percentage would you put on the idea that there is intelligent life somewhere else in the universe? And they would go, probably close to 100%. And I go, okay, what would be the percentage of that life being, you know, humanoid, like they're similarly kind of structured to us with bones and things, right? And they walk upright. Okay, slightly less, right? They would put like, I don't know, maybe 70% or whatever she said. I was like, all right, what are the odds that these beings speak English?
Mhm.
And eventually it got to the point where it's like, what are the odds that there's extraterrestrial life somewhere in the universe? They look like humans. They don't just look like humans, but they look like you. They're actually named your name and they speak your language and they actually had like all your memories. I should be like, I don't know, probably zero, right? And I'm like, that's basically how I feel about God. The more specific you get, the more evidence you're going to need to kind of prove the claims that you're making about that, right? Because if you're making claims based on something, right? So I'm going to ask you where it's coming from, and otherwise you're going to just lower the likelihood. And so the question is God real? Generally speaking, if I'm just going to take, what the general meaning of God, I would say I don't know, right? But then if you say, well, a God that can hear your prayers and it's the God described in the Bible, then I would say that's less likely, especially when how the Bible was constructed and, the fact that it's created by human beings, written by human beings, compiled by human beings, and that, it just so happens that this creator of the universe that listens to prayers cares the most about us. You know what I mean? Like, so you start thinking about all those details and things, and it becomes fairly obvious that a more reasonable hypothesis is that we made it up and that we don't actually know. And it's, there's some utility or some comfort in that idea. And so people continue to believe it. They structure their whole world around it. I wouldn't say it's a great way of explaining the unexplainable, but it's a way that people explain the unexplainable and it feels okay to them. And so for all those reasons, that's why we still have this thing. But yeah, and this is coming from someone who grew up believing it, right? I was raised Catholic. I believed it with all my heart. I tried very, very hard to be, the good, pious boy and do the things I was supposed to do. And the more I dug, the more I got to this point. So that's basically where I'm at.
That's really fair. Cass, how would you respond to that?
So I actually think the opposite, that the more I've dug into the world and the complexities of our universe and the complexities of even just how our brains work and how we're able to reason and how we're able to even think about our own existence, I would say it would take a lot more belief on my part to believe that like that just happens with no design behind it. So like that's kind of where I'm coming from. And I kind of feel like the more I've gone overseas and talked to different people from different perspectives, the more I've seen sort of things that can't be explained just by like randomness come into being, where people, for example, like they need food for the day and they don't know where they're going to get it. And they pray and randomly someone comes to their house and says, hey, I have this food that I just have that I don't need. Do you need it? Those kinds of things where there was no communication from anyone in their community, but somehow their needs were met and they didn't even tell anyone about it. Things like that, where it's like, okay, something bigger is going on here that we should look into.
Well, yeah, I get that. Those intuitions, I think, are human. They're very natural intuitions to have, just like the earth is flat, right? Like our general day-to-day experience is that, we're not walking on a ball, right? Like it doesn't make any sense to think that way. Things look flat. Like you look out at planes, like planes, and you look at it like the ocean and you see like it's flat. Like, so, that it's an understandable intuition to have. And I feel like it's a similar intuition to attribute agency to things that randomly happen because it seems too good to be random and that kind of stuff. But you can examine that and kind of ask more questions, like, and this is all a process that I went through myself, right? I asked myself, well, hold on a second. How come these two things aren't making sense to me? And I would ask, the relevant authorities, and I would get answers that were not very good, right? And it's not their fault, right? Like my determination at this point is that there really isn't a good answer to those things. And that's why at the end of the day, you have to just say, I have no idea, right? But you can assess probability, right? So the likelihood that they say this person was miraculously compelled to go over to their neighbor's house and offer them food, and it just so happened that this person was, in need of it and would otherwise have been starving. That's a beautiful thing. I love that happened. But there are a million things going on in that dynamic and in that scenario that you would have to discount. You would have to figure out a way to like control for in order for the most plausible explanation to be that, God or the Holy Spirit or something kind of propelled this person to go do that thing because it was needed, right? And then you can ask the question of like, well, why was that person starving in the first place? Like, if you're the creator of the universe, how come you don't just make it so people don't starve, right? So that's kind of where my questioning ends up going, right? And the most parsimonious explanation is just that it's more likely that, maybe this neighbor person kind of picked up on signals that they didn't notice unconsciously, because that happens all the time. And maybe it was literally just a fluke, like, oh, I have some extra food, let me offer it. And it just so happened to have been the perfect moment. Who knows, right? I have no way of knowing whether one or the other is true. But the thing is that when you invoke God, this is what I meant earlier about like people using God as an explanation for the unexplainable. You've really just tripled your homework, because now you have to explain this thing that creates things or does things that are unexplainable, right? And usually people go, well, we can't know God's intentions, we can't know God's nature, but they're still kind of presupposing the existence of the God thing when they can just do the I don't know thing a step before that. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I have no idea how this worked out. I have no idea why. I don't know if there even is a why. And that seems to make more sense than to say, I don't know why God did that. Because now you're saying that there's a thing now. You've established this thing and kind of taken it as for granted, but it's a huge thing. You're talking about this creator being that is all powerful. You know what I mean? So it starts to get all tangled up.
Yeah, and I think I would say, then there's this really interesting question of why would people even go that extra step if it's easier to just say, I don't know. I think certainly in apologetics and in Christian belief, there's been a lot of people that have kind of used it as a cop-out, for sure. Totally get that. Or have said, like, I don't know, prayer works, and then they kind of share these examples, and you're like, okay, but that could totally be placebo. Like, of course you'll be happy after you are with people that are in a warm, comforting environment, and you pray together and you feel more together, and so you don't feel lonely after. There are a lot of ways that we can explain these things. But I do think it's so interesting that throughout history, people have taken that extra step of, instead of looking at mysteries as just like, well, I don't know why there are mysteries, they take the extra step of saying, okay, but like, why would a God do this? There's some kind of intuition there, I think, of there being a more powerful being than us and outside of us.
Totally. I mean, we know, that ancient civilizations, the sun went across the sky and they immediately imagined that it must have been some giant man pulling it across the sky, right? Or later it was like, a god on his chariot pulling it, right? And when it rains, they think they're being blessed. And when it doesn't rain, they think they're being punished, because there has to be agency, because that's the experience they have. When in their own lives, nothing happens unless they make it happen, unless they do something. They have to get up, like the seeds don't plant themselves. They have to plant them. And then the seeds, grow into plants or whatever. So there's that. And I do agree that it's fascinating that everyone comes up with their own kind of version of this stuff throughout history, throughout all of human history. Like we were just talking about with, there's a God in the trees, there's a God in the grass, there's God in the winds. I think that just shows that it's a very human intuition based on our own perspective. It's based on the fact that we experience things in this cause and effect kind of way, and we are the cause of things, or other people are the cause of things. So when something happens and we can't explain it, we just go, well, there must be some cause. There must be some some kind of dynamic going on that's similar to the one I'm familiar with, but it's just on a bigger scale. And then the other part of this is that saying I don't know is terrifying, right? Not knowing is absolutely terrifying. And then when you have, the dial tone at the end of the call of death, like, well, what happens then? Like, that's the most terrifying thing of all. So it brings people a lot of comfort to at least, throw that extra step in, because then the story's not over, and et cetera, et cetera. It makes people feel better. There's a profound discomfort that people have. And admittedly, I'm temperamentally better at just sitting with it than a lot of other people that I know, like, people in my family that I've had these discussions with and everything. I can say, like, yeah, I have no idea, dude. And that freaks them out. For them to sit with that part of it and just say, yeah, I don't know either, that's deeply unsettling to them. So I understand why they might want to be motivated to move to the next bit. But for me, it's always been like, yeah, but I don't want to move to the next bit unless I feel confident that there's a thing. And I've just never been able to do it.
That makes sense. This is a fascinating thing. Angel, I want to go back to something you said a little bit earlier, kind of getting into the problem of suffering, because I think that's a huge that's a huge thing that a lot of Christians have to explain. And it's a huge reason a lot of atheists that I've spoken to, including my former self, believe what they did. And in DMs, we've talked about, children dying of malnutrition or stuff like that. And it's like, how could a loving God do that?
Right.
Cass, can you speak? That's not an easy question at all.
Yeah,
but
Cass, can you just real quick just resolve the problem of suffering?
Yeah, I might be sleeping on the couch tonight for this question, but Cass, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, just, I'll share the solution in 5 minutes, and then that will be all.
Yeah. And then do Israel and Gaza next.
The problem of suffering is one that I think all of us struggle with. Even growing up as a Christian, one of the things that I really struggled with most was this question, because I was like, why are there so many people in human trafficking situations or slavery, or why do people who are really, morally good die early and suffer deeply? And those questions, there's almost no answer that you can give that people will be like, oh, well, that makes sense. You can give a really good, clear answer, but every answer has a caveat to it that hits, I think, all of us really deeply, because we've all felt suffering. We've all experienced it and seen it. And so I think where I come from with this question is that there is a brokenness in the world, and that brokenness is partially because God has given us this kind of choice of, do we want to follow him or not? And do we want to actually live out of who he's created us to be or not? And so when people decide to be something that is outside of who God has created them to be, it creates this kind of brokenness in the world. And because then they make choices that then have ripple effects into other areas. And so I think that's part of it. I think if you're looking at God and assuming that he's good, you also have to assume that, especially a God that wants relationship with us, that he would give us a choice for that relationship or not. Because if it's just like, I've created these people for relationship with me and they have no other choice and they just have to be in relationship with me, then it's not a genuine anything, right? If a friend came up to you and said, you're my friend because I've chosen that you're my friend, and you just had to be that as a puppet, it wouldn't be a genuine friendship at all. And so I think in the problem of suffering, it's complicated because it's not as if God is willing these really terrible things to happen. But I think there's a certain amount of him allowing them because of his wanting us to be in relationship with him. And I know that's not a answer that's just gonna solve everything, but that's kind of my foundation of where I've come to. And some of it I still wrestle with God with. I'm just like, there are some hard things that I've gone through that I'm just like, man, I don't get this, right? And so I kind of hold it open-handed too.
Yeah. Well, are we talking about like the God of Abraham specifically, or generally,
like the
more general?
Christian.
Okay, so the Christian God. Okay. So you're probably more well read than I am in terms of this stuff, but from what I've read and what I remember, there are a couple of things there that I think make it even more complicated and difficult for that answer to sit well. The first is, we're talking about like newborn babies born, like they're already born dying, and they last 10 minutes and then they're gone. Right. So there's that. Then there's, things that are not even remotely connected to human action, like tsunamis and earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, right? Like you can say maybe at this point we've contributed somehow because obviously we're in the ecosystem and in the environment and influencing it. But like, Pompeii, like, you know what I mean? Like there's got to be some point where that's the chicken that laid the egg, right? Like it just randomly happens. A meteor just hits and all the dinosaurs are gone, right? Like that kind of thing. So there's that neither of those fall into the dynamic that you just described, where it's about people being given a choice. And then when they make that choice, there are consequences, right? Because in neither of those two scenarios was there a choice by the being that is suffering. And the third thing is, this is why I asked about which God we're talking about, because if you deny the request, right? Like if you deny God's friend request, there's another big consequence to that that is pretty explicitly said all the time, which is, you don't go to the nice place, you go to the bad place. And so that kind of sounds like friendship at the point of a gun. It's just delayed, right? You can't see the gun, but there's a little red dot on your head, and eventually you'll get the shot, right? So it's kind that's kind of what it ends up feeling like in this specific dynamic right now. It's possible. So the assumption of goodness is based on the specifics of which God we're talking about, right? Because you can also talk about a creator being that doesn't care one way or another what happens to us. It just created things, and it's just kind of, set the watch and it's now ticking and it is what it is. And we could talk about that, right? But this is a different circumstance where we're getting more specific and saying, no, he cares and he wants there to be a relationship and he's given us a choice. And that's why there's suffering, right? But then now you have to contend with those three things I just brought up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you did just bring up a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. I know.
I think, like you were saying, we're part of nature in a way. And I think within Christian belief, there's also this dynamic of there being an enemy. And so I think Christians would often explain kind of the things that happen, like earthquakes and meteors, as the enemy trying to pull people away from relationship with God. I mean, that's also not an easy explanation, because there are lots of ways that you could look at that and go, okay, but then why does God allow this enemy to have so much power?
Who created the enemy?
Yeah, exactly.
For sure.
And why did he give him a choice, like, to rebel, Because ultimately the story in Christianity is that, like, God created this angel, and the angel ended up wanting to be as powerful as God, and so he fell and brought a bunch of other angels with him, and that kind of starts the story of also how people were deceived. So it's this big, complicated dynamic in the sense that it's not just this dynamic between God and people, it's also this dynamic between God and angels and principalities and things like that. But I think that there's something about God creating things that are good, and then there being a certain brokenness because of him allowing those good things to choose to be in a relationship with him or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so even kind of the physical world, we see echoes of that within earthquakes and things like that.
Mm.
I think, let's see, what else did you bring up? The other thing is,
sorry, I hit you with a lot. But like natural, so
dying
you just
babies
kind
and
of
going to hell, I think, were the two,
Yeah,
right?
yes.
Yeah, and earthquakes, right? So like earthquakes, and then dying babies, and then the going to hell thing. Yeah. So you touched on the earthquakes thing a little bit, but I'm not totally clear what the connection is though. Like, because there are people affected by earthquakes and floods and tsunamis and things that didn't do anything wrong, right? And then there are people who did a lot wrong that never get an earthquake. So it just seems weird, right?
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is partially where most of us say, okay, assuming that God is all powerful and outside of time and things, he sees it from a different perspective. So what we're seeing is a very temporary kind of suffering, and he's seeing a much bigger perspective of maybe that baby would have had a lot more suffering in its life if it had continued or something like that. But I mean, of course, that's a really tricky answer, because you could say that about anything, right? Like you could say, like, we just don't know, but God is doing something, and then it feels like a cop out. I think even within theologians that talk about this a lot, it's just some of these issues, you get to a point where you say, okay, like, it's more complicated and deep and messy, and we know this much, and we also don't know a lot about how this works. And like, I went into theology thinking that I would come out with like really good answers for all of these questions, and I came out with way more questions than I had answers. But in the process, I also came out with knowing that, at least for me, as I wrestled, knowing that God is good, that he's moving, that there are some things that I don't understand, but also that that's part of being a finite person and just not seeing the full picture yet. When it comes to hell, I think this is actually a really interesting question, because for so long, like, we've had this message, especially in the US and other places, of kind of turn or burn, repent or be sent kind of messages. And I actually think that's done a huge disservice, because that's not God's heart at all. I think God's heart is for us to be present with him. And because he's good, and because he's the creator of everything that's good, that means that, like, we then get to be in the midst of all of the good things that he's created, and all of the good things, like the goodness of him and his love. And so one explanation that I've heard that I think is actually reasonably compelling is that when we're talking about hell, it's mainly that God allows us to choose to be with him or not, and to be in relationship with him or not. But if he's the one that, I mean, his presence brings all things that are good, then if you choose to be outside of that presence, those things are absent. And so it's not that he's, like, condemning people to this terrible, terrible place because he has this huge wrath and wants people in fire forever. It's more that he's saying, okay, I mean, I long for this relationship with you. I long for us to be, in this, like, if God is love, he wants us to be in that eternally. And when people choose to not, he lets that happen, but then it ends up being a place that is not very desirable. So that's kind of
but that's still kind of the point of the gun, though, right? It's like, look, everything is really awesome with me. You don't have to come, but if you don't, it's gonna suck. And it's like, well, like, that's not much of a choice. You know what I mean? And I look, again, I just want to make it clear, like, I went through all of this. I struggled through all of this thinking, and very actively wanted a very particular answer, and it's not the answer I ended up with, you know? So I just want that to be clear. Like, this was a very difficult thing for me to do as I was growing up and dealing with just growing up on top of all of this, right? Like, this is like, you know, the scaffolding is collapsing on top of me. So it was rough. But for some reason, I couldn't console myself with something unless I really dug into it and felt like it was solid ground. So that's why I have all these questions, and that's why I poke holes in all this stuff, you know? But yeah, so that, I mean, that still kind of feels like, it still kind of feels like a point of the gun scenario. Like, everything's going to be really bad unless you do the thing that I'm telling you, you probably should do and that I would really like, you know, like, yeah. And then there's, you know, again, if we're getting specific about this particular strain of belief, right? You know, there's the whole setup with Satan, and there's a place that you go to. It's not, you know, so there have been other interpretations that I've heard where, you know, people have kind of anthropomorphized Satan into being a specific like a specific being, right? Like I was just fascinated by this stuff. I happen to know, like, Lucifer as a proper noun is like a mistranslation of a mistranslation, right? Like, it literally just meant the morning star, and it was used in an old Canaanite myth and then got kind of translated into the Bible. And then from there, it ended up somehow becoming capitalized. And then there was some retconning where it's like, okay, the opposer, the Satan that God is speaking to in the book of Job, that's actually Satan, capital S. And we're actually going to go back, and actually the snake in the Garden of Eden, that was also Satan with a capital S, but that was kind of done retroactively. And it's turned into this whole thing. And the passage in the Bible about Lucifer, about the fallen star and all that kind of stuff, was interpreted to be, oh, there was an angel who rebelled against God, and then that's the Satan, and the whole Paradise Lost thing, which is fascinating, beautiful stuff. And I'm really intrigued by all of it, right? But like, now we're talking about translations of translations of interpretations of interpretations of translations. But it is fundamental to this dynamic that we're talking about, where it's like, all right, you either go to one place with where God wants you to, or you end up in the other place, and it's not fun. It's not going to be good. And that's the dynamic we're in. And even if, like, taking everything you just said, we're still kind of in that dynamic, and that seems fundamentally unfair, right? Like, it's kind of another thing that happened to me as I was thinking about all this stuff growing up is like, well, what would I do if I was a parent? Right? Like, imagine I'm a parent and I'm like, I really want a relationship with my child. And I give them the choice, like, look, you don't have to have a relationship with me. But if you don't have a relationship with me, if you don't do the thing that I want, if you don't come into my kind of home and do the things that I want to do, I'm going to cast you out, or you will be effectively cast out. We'll make it passive. You'll be effectively cast out, and it's going to be abysmally bad for you. I just couldn't imagine ever doing that. You know what I mean? Like, you can do the tough love thing and be like, look, you need to move out. You need to get your own place. You need to get a job, right? But you're still guiding them and saying this, I'm helping you set yourself up so that you can be okay. That's the ultimate goal there. Whereas in this scenario, that's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal seems to be, well, you made your decision, you know, enjoy eternity. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think, Julian, did you want to say something? Do you want to interject?
Yeah, sorry. So I find that fascinating. And sorry, as the moderator, I have a hard time like not jumping in sometimes because I have sort of occasionally different answers than Cassie would give.
It's
and
great.
I'm like, no, my role is to not intervene too much.
If you want to double team me, that's totally fine.
No, I'll stick to what I said in the beginning. Although I'm confident you could take us, you know. But no, what I want to jump into is you said something really interesting about talking about why you grew up, or how you grew up this way, and how you sort of started wrestling with this stuff and being unhappy with the answers. Mm-hmm. And it reminded me of, there's a psychological term that you're probably familiar with, but just for our listeners, the idea of like naive realism, the idea of, with emphasis on naive, right, where it's like we all think that we came to our beliefs just by mainlining reality, and it's like, oh, I see the world with perfect clarity, and everyone else, there's no emotional biases in this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things I want to touch base on in this conversation, is that because both when I was an atheist and when I now as a Christian, I mean, I can give logical explanations for why I believe what I believe, but ultimately I'm human. And so a lot of it comes down to emotional reasoning. And so I wanted to, this is where I can actually jump in and answer my own question. One of the few places where I'll do that, this conversation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to shift away from is XYZ true? Like, is God real? Is the Abrahamic God real? And focus more on like disregarding whether or not the Abrahamic God is real. Why is it important to us, each of the three of us, on an emotional level that be real or not real? And so I can go first, then Angel, then Cassie.
Sure.
Yeah. So for me, because like I've read, I've read C.S. Lewis, I've read different apologists, and I find them intellectually convincing. But that's not, if I'm being honest, that's not why I'm Christian. That's not why I believe in God. That's sort of the scaffolding on top.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, I mean, I think you're friends with John Haidt, or you friends, know him a little. Yeah.
Yeah, I know him. I've been in the same room with him a couple of times. He's very nice. I have his email, but I wouldn't say we're friends. So that would be presumptuous.
That's fair. But he was actually the person who convinced. I'm not friends with I admire him. I would love to be friends with him.
Oh, he's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. But he's the one who convinced me of this because he talks about, moral intuitions come first, strategic reasoning comes second, Yeah. And so in my own case, the intellectual justifications are the shiny, polished things I can like dust out to show I'm smart, whatever. And those are cool. And those are actually really important to have those intellectual conversations. But if I'm being honest, the reason I'm Christian is deeper. It's that I grew up the first 30 years of my life, and the first 30 years like kind of blew, honestly. I mean, it was like, just different bad things happen, abuse, depression, addiction, whatever, And so when I found this idea of a God who's outside of that, who's like bigger than just the world, I was like, this world kind of blows. If there's something that can like redeem that and something bigger than that outside of that, not just like the escapism of like reading books or something, but genuinely like there's something beyond this.
Mm-hmm.
On an emotional level, that was hugely appealing to me. And also, something that could kind of like redeem my own suffering of like, oh, there's a reason for this. Like there's an eternity, there's something beyond this. But ultimately the idea of being able to almost like Narnia, like walk through a door that lets me into something deeper and richer and more joyful than kind of the world that I experienced in my 20s, for instance, was on an emotional level, like hugely motivating to me. So Angel, disregarding for a moment, like whether or not the Abrahamic God is real, do you have some insight? Can you share with us, like, is it important to you on an emotional level that the Abrahamic God not be real? And if so, why is that?
No, I wouldn't say that it's important to me that the Abrahamic God not be real. I have no stake in the question, really, right? Like, I just want to know what is and what isn't.
Yeah.
And I have to, as a result of not being able to know what is and what isn't all the time, I have to also be okay with not knowing anything. And I think what I do have a very strong emotional desire for is to not phase into thinking I know something or pretending I know something when I actually don't. I think that's probably what I feel is the most important thing. And that's probably why I, despite not getting the answers I was looking for, not ending up at the conclusion that I wanted to end up at, I kept going anyway, because I think that's my primary motivation. It's just, I want to know. And if I can't know, I have to be okay with accepting that part of it and not pretending that I know things. So
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Cass?
Yeah, so I think for me, the importance of believing that there is even not just the Abrahamic God, but a God in general, like some kind of intelligent being that has created us and the universe and everything, comes from, as I've observed myself and other people, I think it's really important to the human existence that there's purpose to all of what we're doing. Like, and something that what I see in our culture today a lot is people wanting to create their own identity and create their own purpose, and really working hard to say, this is who I am because this is who I've decided I want to be, and this is my purpose because this is who I've decided. I mean, this is what I've decided I should be doing. And I think purpose goes so much deeper than that in my own life and in other people's lives. So my parents got divorced when I was pretty young, and I wrestled with these questions a lot at that point of saying, okay, like this thing that I've been told doesn't match up with having divorced parents and having this huge brokenness in my own life. And so that's when I started to wrestle with these things and say, okay, like, I don't even know if there is a God, because what I thought was going to be consistent isn't, you know? Yeah. And I came actually to the complete opposite, well, perhaps not complete opposite, but to the conclusion that actually he does exist and does interact and does care. And then I saw that kind of echo throughout my life in different ways. And so that's kind of how I've gotten to where I am now. It's through a lot of wrestling, but through different conclusions.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Angel, something else you wanted to add to that? I see you're kind of thinking.
No, I'm just thinking because I lost the train there. I heard something and I flagged it that I wanted to follow up with a question, but I can't remember now. But I obviously, yeah, I feel that. So I just think, the purpose thing. I agree with you that purpose is extremely important, right? So there's a straw man of atheism or atheists that we think that we are also automatically nihilists, right? Everything's meaningless, nothing matters, right? Like that's kind of well, if you don't believe in God, why don't you kill yourself, right? Like nothing matters. And that's absurd because you don't need God for there to be meaning. You don't need God for there to be purpose. Purpose is created by us, right? The concept only makes sense because there are conscious beings able to grapple with it, right? And I think that the answer to what is the meaning of life is in the capacity to ask the question. The fact that you can ask it, that's the meaning. The meaning of life is to find it yourself, to search or the things that resonate with you, the things that you connect with, the things that matter to you, and build your life around that, right? And like you were saying about, people kind of creating their identities and saying, this is my purpose, I'm going to find it and I'm going to do this thing. And your point that it goes deeper than that, I agree. I do think it goes deeper than that. But I still think that's us creating it. We make meaning. Meaning isn't found. It doesn't exist in the universe outside of us, right? We create meaning because we are the conscious beings able to reflect and think and, kind of be self-conscious, right? Like we can know ourselves, we can know one another. That's a unique thing in the universe, right? And it is what it is. I don't know why, right? Maybe there isn't a why again, but like that's the thing that meaning comes from. And so if somebody says, my life has meaning because I believe in God and et cetera, everything that follows from that, that's still them building their own meaning using God as their foundational kind of principle or as their bedrock, right? Now, whether God exists or not, that's still what they're doing, right? And so that's just one way to do it versus all the others. There's a thing about, and I've argued with people about this, there's a thing about how like if there's no God to kind of be outside of time and space and to be outside of our own perception, then there's no such thing as objectivity. There's no such thing as meaning and purpose, like with the capital letters. But that always seems strange to me because what would that meaning and purpose be, right? Like it can only mean something to us. It can only mean something because we have the capacity to care in the first place. So it's weird for someone to even want something that is like a meaning outside of our ability to care. That seems almost contradictory to what meaning actually is. Does that make any sense? I don't know. It's complicated because sometimes our language fails us. But yeah, that's kind of, you know.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think I would say that in my own life, well, as I observe, if we're creating meaning ourselves, I still think even just wondering about how do we have this capacity to create meaning and to be creative in what we do and to be individuals, I find the answer of we just created ourselves to be like there's something deeper than that, I think. So that's kind of
there's like like an intuition that's guiding you, right? Like you feel like you discover meaning. You don't make it, right?
I think it's in a way like that, and in a way I think we are created to be creative beings. And so there are ways that we do get to kind of discover and discern what direction we want to go and what kind of person we want to be and where we find even our meaning, whether it's sitting on a bench every morning and kind of looking at the sunrise or whatever. But I think in general, even the capacity to do that comes from something deeper.
Oh, I agree. I guess I would just point to a different place than you. I would say, you know, we are deeply social animals. We need each other, and on a fundamental level, like that's just how we're wired. We need each other. We need people. We're the species that is able to collaborate at a level of complexity that is unique, right? We're the only ones who can really collaborate at this level, right? We have bees and we have ants and we have other examples of things, but it's nowhere near as creative. It's nowhere near as adaptive. Like we just have this amazing capacity. And I think that's where I would put it, right? Like that desire for meaning comes from our just wiring of having to be a social species. We are that. We've evolved that way. I don't know if we want to get into the evolution thing, but I think that's where it comes from. It's an outgrowth of that. Now, why that? I don't know. I have no idea. And that's the thing. Sometimes why is the wrong question. You know, like why are we here? That almost seems like like beside the point, right? Because we could say, how are we here? Well, there was one cell and then blah, blah, blah. But when you say, why are we here? You're sort of outsourcing the meaning to something else when really all there is conscious experience, right? Like, so if we talk about ethical frameworks, morality, any kind of rules we have, any kind of norms we have, they're all strategies for maximizing flourishing. That's really all they are at bottom, right? Any ethical codes, any religious codes about how you're supposed to behave, the goal is this will make your life better. This will make you better in society. You will benefit from doing it this way. And other people will also benefit, which means you also benefit. So it's just this cycle of that. And I think that that's the thing, is it all boils down to conscious experience. It all boils down to right now in this moment, what am I doing and what can I do? And we have this innate desire to make it as good as possible, and finding something that you enjoy, something, like writing or music or whatever. For me, that brings me joy, and it brings other people joy to experience it with me and to kind of engage with it. So it's this beautiful thing. I've found this thing for my life, right? And I don't really need to ask questions outside of it. Like I don't need to go, why does playing guitar make me happy? I don't care. Who cares? It just does, and I'm lucky that I get to do it, and I'm really lucky when other people enjoy it, because that also makes me happy. So it's kind of, that's what I mean, is like it almost feels like besides the point to ask. It could be fascinating to ask. Like I'm not saying we shouldn't ask, but it almost feels like that's not the point,
That's interesting. I mean, okay, I totally agree with you about us being social creatures. and needing a relationship. Like that's absolutely core to, I think, who we are. And I think that's why so many religions in a lot of ways are so attractive to humans, because we need that connection. We need those like common grounds that we can come together in. And with music and art and taking walks in the mountains, as we're in Colorado, and things like that, there's a lot of joy to be had with those things. And I think, there are sometimes the asking why takes away from just being in those situations and enjoying and soaking it in. And we can get really heady with kind of why is reality the way that it is, when there's actually some really good things about just being in it and soaking it up and enjoying existing.
But it's more than that. It's about, like, I just had the idea that asking why is the sunset beautiful is almost like, it's almost like filming the sunset with your phone instead of just watching it, right? Like, why are you doing that? What's the point of filming it on your phone so that then you can look at it and it won't actually be there, but you're looking at a recording of it instead of having looked at it? There's some weird kind of step back that we decide to take for some higher reason, like, oh, if I have it in my phone, then what? Like, we don't even really think about it, but it's just a thing we do. I feel like it's almost like that. We need there to be some kind of reason outside of the thing itself. And it almost doesn't make sense. Like, I feel like if we were able to step out of our own kind of perception and just look at ourselves doing that, to be like, why are they doing that? What is the point of that? And then then you're asking why again. So it's just, it's like it's like a weird infinite regress.
This is again a really interesting philosophical conversation. I just want to kind of cut this line of discussion short because I know it's coming to the top of the hour. And Angel, I don't know when you have to go, but I wanted to ask one more question.
Yeah, I have plenty of time, so don't worry about it. Yeah,
cool. I did want to ask one more question, and that is, this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation. I know on my end, I talk to a lot of Christians, and I'm like, guys, please don't like try and convert people this way. Like there was I'll tell a quick story that Cassie and I both know, and it was this guy. He's a white dude in shorts, and he's a cop. And he goes into like a bad part of town, like part of his job. He's meeting an informant, and the informant's looking behind him, and he gets all wide-eyed and scared, and he dashes off. And these 8 gang members, come out of this area, and they circle around this white dude, and he's like, I'm gonna die. And then the leader looks at him, he's like, are you aware that you could die right now? And the guy's like, yes, I'm very aware of that. He's like, no, really, are you? Yes, I'm very aware of that fact. Where do you think you would go when you die? And this white guy's, and Jamie's like, are you trying to convert me? Like, I'm already a believer. And the gang leader looks to his friends, he's like, see, it's that easy. And it's like, no, please don't do this. Like, please don't try and convert people by like surrounding them and threatening them. And then I've had atheist friends who are like, oh, well, do you believe in God? Do you believe in God? Like, do you believe in dragons? Stuff like that. And I'm like, that question's never convinced anybody. I'm sorry.
No.
But I'm just curious, like, because one of the things I want to do with this kind of conversation series is move away from the tribalism of like everything that we end up in so often on Twitter, especially, is like everything my side does is good and everything your side does is bad.
Yeah.
Are there things that your side does? And this question's for both of you, but Angel, maybe you start. Are there things your side does where you think, guys, please don't argue that way? Like, this is just giving all of us a bad name. This is a really rude way to interact. Like, please stop.
Yes. And that's the reason I don't even consider it my side. Like, I just don't do it. I never do that. Right. I'm a Groucho Marxist. I don't want to be a part of any club that would have me as a member. I'm not on your team. I don't want to be on any teams. I don't want to be in any tribes. My tribe is humanity. My team is everyone, and I don't want to deal with that kind of nonsense, right? But yeah, I mean, there are better and worse ways to attempt to persuade people. I do think that it is important to engage on these topics because they matter. not just for the individual lives, right? Like, if you discover that you've been wrong about something at 85, that is very different than if you had discovered it at 25, right? Like, that's 60 years of your life that you were, living a falsehood or, assuming a falsehood. And that has an effect on how you behave, right? Other things, other conclusions that you come to, right? It's all connected and it matters. I mean, the most practical level, like people vote based on whatever they think, right? Whatever they believe is going to influence how they vote. And that's going to affect everybody else, right? Depending on how many people agree with that person. So these things matter. It's really important. So I couldn't disagree more strongly with the idea of don't discuss politics and sex and religion, right? Like, we should always talk about that stuff. We should talk about that stuff a lot. We should get really good at talking about it. Part of the reason that we suck at talking about it is probably because of that taboo around talking about it. Like, we're just not good at it. We have no practice. And yeah, I mean, people get tribal. I mean, I don't even think atheists should be a we.
Yeah.
Right. Because it doesn't make sense. Like, you don't, I mean, there's no group of people with a name for themselves because they don't golf. Right.
Yeah. Like, so disregarding like the we part of it, are there people arguing for atheism or arguing against Christianity or whatever, where you think like, guys, this is an insulting way to, like, I agree with you, but this is an insulting way to make our point.
I would even say, I would even say I don't even agree with you, because there's an arrogance that I've seen on both ends, obviously, but there's an arrogance that comes from like, oh, this poor idiot, or not even this poor idiot, just this idiot who doesn't believe things the way that I do, or doesn't see the world the way I do. Like, that's a bad starting point from which to make your case, like, I'm smart and you're dumb. I mean, that's not going to work. And this is coming from someone who has very strongly argued with people. I've gotten into it, and I believe religion is nonsense, and, et cetera, et cetera. But what is your goal? Are you trying to piss people off? Or are you trying to persuade people? Like, that you're going to have to get them to understand your reasoning and their reasoning. And you also have to recognize that there's plenty of stuff you don't understand and you don't know. So this condescension is the wrong way to go, for sure.
I think that's a really good point. Cassie, are there things that Christians do where you kind of shake your head like, please don't do this?
Oh gosh, yes. So I actually find a lot of how Christians, especially in the US, approach these things to be reasonably damaging for the most part. And with the wrong kind of heart behind it, of people just wanting to convince other people to be on our team or something. And it's just, I always think of the example of, in scripture, there's a story of, right, when Jesus is getting arrested, one of his disciples tries to defend him and cuts off the ear of a guard. And Jesus is like, that is not what we're here for. Like, he puts the ear back. I think Christians a lot of times can end up cutting off people's ears and completely miss the point of what God is trying to do and of his heart for people. And so I think a lot of times I look at just people's approaches and things and go, oh goodness, like, this is not actually what we want to represent, and there are better ways. But I also have a lot of grace for it, because I know in my own life too, as I've been kind of sharing more of even just what I believe, sometimes I do it well and sometimes I do it really poorly. And there's a growing process in that. All of us are healing and broken in certain ways, and we relate to other people out of that brokenness a lot of times. And I mean, this is why we see so much, like, so many sort of buzzwords in a way in our culture now of trauma and being triggered, and there's deep stuff underneath that. But I think if we could have more open conversations, and if we could kind of step away from what we believe and go, yeah, okay, why do I see the world this way? And actually kind of try and listen to each other rather than just telling each other what we believe and then completely closing our ears off to whatever they say. I think we could build such a better society and deeper relationships with people. And
I agree.
So that's kind of mine.
I probably told you this, Julian. Last time we talked, I probably told you this, but there's a conversation between two people about probably Scientology or something, that Going Clear documentary, probably talking about it and talking about how crazy it is, right? Like Scientology is nuts, man. Like, whoa, I can't believe, they believe that stuff. That's wild, and it's like, and then one person in the conversation said, was older and is, Catholic. And I was like, yeah, like some people believe really crazy things. Some people have crazy religions. It's a good thing we have the right one. And just very unironically,
Yeah.
And of course I hear that and I'm like, that's so funny that you don't see what you're saying. But they very earnestly said it this way. And there was no irony at all. And that's the problem, right? It's like, it's almost like figuring out that a fish is wet, right? Like you're a fish and you just figured out that you're wet. Like you have to figure out that there's a thing called water and that you're in it and you've been in it and you don't know anything outside of it. And so it's almost impossible for you to even conceive of what that is. What does that mean? But it's the thing we have to do if we expect to get anywhere. So I think a lot of atheists are people who realize that they were fish who were wet somehow. Like either somebody yanked them out of the water and tossed them back in, or they hit the surface and were like, whoa, or something. But that's probably what happened.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, we are coming up on the top of the hour as far as this recording goes. So closing statements, just is there a particular message you want to leave our audience at Derate the Hate with? Angel, you want to go first, and then Cassie can close us out?
Sure. Closing statement. We kind of went all over the place here.
Yeah.
But going back to is God real? I mean, yeah. I don't think that it's even necessary, right? Like I think probably the best thing that I could say is one of the most important things in my life was learning to sit with discomfort and to sit with fear and face it and just deal with it and recognize, that actually, funnily enough, the serenity prayer, right? Like the things I can control, I will control. And the things I can't control, I have to let go.
Yeah.
And the key is knowing the difference, right? So whoever's granting you this capacity to do that, or whatever it is, I think it's important. I think that matters. So learn to sit with discomfort and to be able to say, I don't know, because it will always be true that there are more things you don't know and don't understand than that you do. So we're going to have to get more comfortable with that. And the thing is, if we don't, that list of things we don't know gets bigger and bigger. And the things on that list are probably really important. So I'd probably just say that.
That makes sense. Intellectual humility on every side is really essential. Because none of us really know,
Mm-hmm.
All right, Cass?
I think I would just say I've seen a lot of the world because of working with refugees and hearing their stories, and also just working with, people in Egypt and people in Kenya and kind of all over the place. And I've seen what I would say is God move in some incredible ways all over the world. And I've seen kind of people's lives changed because of God and because suddenly they were feeling trapped in something and they were set free because of God. And we could go back and forth all day about whether that was God or not, but I think those changes are deep enough that I don't think there is another explanation. And I think that it is actually really deeply important that we acknowledge reality. And for me, I've come to the conclusion that reality is that there is a God and that he's good and that he moves. And so I've seen kind of the importance of that overseas and here and in my own life. And but I also hold, what I believe to be pretty open-handed also, to say, okay, I am probably wrong about a lot of things. and so it's a really good journey to be able to hear where other people are at and what they've learned, and also kind of wrestle with those things as well, and not just kind of say, okay, this is what I believe and it will always be what I believe. I think it's important to continue to wrestle with what is reality and what's important, and what things can we leave as kind of side questions, and what things do we really actually need to wrestle with deeply as humans. So yeah, it's just been a great conversation.
Likewise, yeah.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on. This has been absolutely incredible. Is there a place people can find you online if they want to kind of carry on the conversation?
For me, angeleduardo.com is my website. I'm on Twitter at strangeledweird. You can find me through my website though. But yeah, that's probably the best way to find me.
Cool. Cass, are you very active on social?
So I haven't been very active on social, but I do have a Facebook. I think it's just Cassie Kimbriel. And I occasionally am on Twitter, but of course I don't have the followership. So you can find me. You're welcome to find me, but yeah, I'm not always active on it.
Yeah, you're better off, probably.
I'm very intentionally a bit distant from social media. Yeah.
I was dumb enough to make it like part of my job. So.
All right, well, thank you guys so much for hopping on. This has been absolutely incredible. And yeah, I'll talk to you both of you guys soon.
Sure. Yeah, thanks a lot. Thank you both.
Yeah, thank you.
Friends, if there's anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, please make sure to hit that share button. Share it with your friends, share it far and wide. And of course, if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe right from our website so you can get the Derate the Hate podcast sent to your email inbox every week. So this is Wilk wrapping up for the week, saying get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything that you've got, and remember it's up to you to make each and every day the day that you want it to be. If there is something that you would like to share with me, you can catch me on most social media platforms, or you can email me directly, wilk@wilksworld.com. With that, my friends, I am going to back on out of here, and we will catch you next week. Take care.